other, but MJ and her staff, coordinate the work that the solid waste program does and waste site cleanup does. So it's so we are working on it together, but there are different rules that apply depending upon exactly where it is. And as MJ said, particularly if there are people being exposed, if it's a private well or a public water supply well, that triggers additional action. So I think that the presence of contamination in monitoring wells near the landfill does kind of warrant scrutiny. The solid waste program will and does look at that kind of in the bigger context, but it doesn't trigger the same kind of immediate response action that finding something in a private well does.
Thank you. And before we answer any more questions, I ask, before you answer a question, just identify yourself, your name and your address, just for our records. So does anyone have any more questions? Ma'am?
Yes, hi, Jen Moberg from 94 H Foot Road, Charlton. Has the DEP disregarded the 3 companies that are located on Route 169 as potential sources of contamination?
We haven't disregarded anything. As I was explaining with this whole strict liability statute, we have a 52-acre landfill that has dioxane both in the monitoring wells and in the 900-foot deep irrigation well. We have homes in Charlton that also have dioxane. So right now, that's our working assumption. If Casella wishes to look for other parties, we have told them that makes sense. You can do that. It's not DEP's obligation to do that. We understand that they have reached out to 3 companies, and then they had identified one of the parcels on H Foot Road, which is owned by a private party, as potential sources. They contacted the 3 businesses and requested access, requested cooperation for them to be able to come on and to do some investigation of those properties, and I believe had not heard back from them. We reached out to the individual property owner who did allow us to come onto his property, and there is a drum there, and it has roofing tar, foundation tar in it. Kevin went out, took a bunch of soil samples. We're waiting for the results. We did not see any areas of staining, any areas where it looked like there was drum disposal. Kevin had some sort of fancy magnet thing that magnetometer that was so sensitive that it was detecting the iron deposit, the mineral deposits in the rocks. So we did a pretty good look. Not our obligation to do that, but it's individual property owners, somebody who's right here in the thick of it, so we were happy to do that piece of work. In regard to the others, there's a system in the regulations that if a person, a PRP who's conducting a response action, needs to go on somebody else's property, and that person doesn't let them come on the property, there is a mechanism. You can come to us, and we have a regulation that allows us to help you get access. And it won't go into all the details, but we have told them for months now it's available to them. If you're having difficulty with any of those 3 companies and you would like to invoke that process, the LSP knows how to do that, and they have not done that yet. But we're not saying it doesn't make sense to look at some of those. Maybe it does, but it's up to them.
And I mean, in terms of them just not responding to go on site for testing, given the circumstances where this could be continuously pointed at these particular parties, is there a reason why there hasn't been any enforcement of that, of the testing, or being able to get to these properties for testing? Why wouldn't that be pushed at this point?
I don't know why they haven't pushed. They can come to us at any point in time, and we will send those. They have to ask us to do that. I will be candid with you. We told them we were going to Mr. Fox's property and asked them if they would like to take split samples, and they declined. So I'm not sure. You would have to ask Tracy or someone from Casella what their thought process is regarding those programs.
Deb, do you have a question?
Yes, Debbie will talk with the Telegram Gazette. Does it work in the opposite direction? Because I heard from Millennium today they've been named, and they want to be cleared. They have told Ty and Bond they're welcome to come onto the property, conduct a test. They want it out publicly, that they are not the source. And according to this email from their public relations person, it says they have granted permission as of this time. Casella has not approached Millennium with a plan or proposal to perform any work. So what they're essentially saying is these stories are coming out, and Millennium is named over and over and over again. And they've opened the door for additional testing on their property to clear them of this assertion, and they're not getting anywhere. So does it work the opposite way? Can DEP step in and say, now that you've publicly declared or asserted that this business is a potential source, you need to take some action to either back up what you said or step away from the claim?
I can tell you tonight, we have no information to consider Millennium Power a source.
Fair enough.
Any more questions? Ma'am?
Hi, I'm Linda Corcalis. I'm chairman on the Board of Health in Sturbridge. And I would like to invite you guys to continue the conversation in Sturbridge. With that, I do want to thank you guys for actually, I know all the hard work that Mark Baldy and his team and the whole group has been doing. I've been in contact with him, sending him information that I find as well, that hopefully could be helpful. Time Bond, I did actually go to a presentation that Time Bond had given in Southbridge. I believe it was probably the same presentation that was given to the DEP. Mr. Murphy, who is their vice president, actually presented it. He also gave a presentation in 2012. There was a 5-year trend analysis that Jim McQuaid had required them to do based on the fact that the monitoring wells had exceedances of chromium, lead, arsenic, and some of the other contaminants. That trend analysis was done. They looked at a 2011 geosyntech hydrogeological report that stated that the water direction went east and west, and also on the easterly edge. I spoke to Mark and I said, Mark, have you seen this report? He says, I've heard of this report, but I've never seen it. And I said, well, it's interesting because that geosyntech report, nobody has. Time Bond said it was lost during a move. The Southbridge Board of Health said, ask Ty and Bond, we don't know where it is. But I thought maybe Jim McQuaid would have it because I'm sure it was sent electronically. So that's one thing that if any of you have access to that, we would like it too.
Did you ask Jim?
I actually asked Mark if he could get it from Jim, so if you happen to find it. But I said, you know, the funny thing is, Mark, I said, this is not like 1982 or something. All of this stuff was created electronically in 2011. Somebody has this.
So it's possible that it exists electronically. The 21E program was ahead of its time, thank you, Paul Locke. Everything in that program is filed electronically. It's all uploaded directly and it is available to the public. Our other programs are not quite there yet. So
I'm thinking it might be an archived email because it was probably sent.
it's possible. We'll talk to Jim about taking a look. We also archive hard copies with the State Archives, the Office of the Secretary of State. So we'll take a look.
Well, I mean, the point of this is that when that 5-year trend analysis was done, there was also, actually the Telegram and Gazette actually had an article that came out that I think Brian Lee had done in reference to it. Because people from Southbridge brought up their concerns at a town council meeting in respect to the exceedances back then in all of these monitoring wells. And the problem that they said, well, geez, you know, but Ty and Bond said, you don't have to worry about it because you're not drinking out of these wells. Now, mind you, the report that they sent out and what they had just given before was also signed by this Vice President Murphy. He signed both of them, and they actually contradict each other in which direction the water flows.
All right,
So
we'll take a look.
the newest wells that they now are monitoring that are closest to Sturbridge, that I kind of alerted you guys to that
The
word.
replacement wells.
That,
Is that-
right,
yeah, okay.
these 3 wells, I believe, are coming up with TCE and PCE. One, I think, is actually at an exceedance. Now, interesting enough, they say that that water is not flowing from the west, or going west. They're now saying that the McKinstry Brook wildlife fishery area, the water's actually going there. So I said to somebody, is it possible, is this landfill a black hole? Because it seems like everything flows towards it, but nothing comes from it. So,
No, I appreciate that, and as a non-technical person, it does seem that way sometimes. I listen to the explanation of the experts, and there are always explanations for these things. Water wants to go to water, so I
this
mean.
is their explanation.
Right, no, but I'm
Since-
just, I mean,
Yeah.
sometimes there are, we've been looking at, and what we're just talking about, you know, there's a monitoring well network around, down here. They've done some replacement for monitoring wells that if the expansion does go forward, would have to be replaced. And they're coming up with different contaminants than we've seen before. And there's also, in this new report, is the fact that wetland A, down the bottom there, may in fact be drawing water toward it. All of which is interesting. It does have some bearing on, again, on the expansion project, whether there's gonna be an interceptor trench that would capture some of this water that may be moving west toward the wetland. The issue that we wanna talk with you guys about is the deep bedrock, the drinking water well. So there's a whole lot going on at this site at all different levels.
Well, Sturbridge is
So-
also not being tested at all. So there's no private wells in Sturbridge that are being tested. And we just hired a new hydrogeological guy who will be coming in working for Sturbridge.
Good.
And I think they actually have an appointment with you, Kevin, on another matter in West Brookfield later on. But his name's Mr. Foss. David Foss.
Okay,
So-
yes.
So the interesting thing is about this is that they have one coming for dioxane and also.
I'm sorry.
I was.
I turned my phone on. I swear I did.
But Kevin, the thing that I want to ask you specifically, though, had to do with those wells and whether or not, when they found exceedances of 1.4 dioxin, they decided to say, oh geez, opposed to just going another 500 feet, why don't we go 1,500 feet? Because really, they've been saying all along, the water is coming towards Sturbridge. Sturbridge has not had a monitoring program for anybody in Sturbridge at all. And being that the wells in Charlton are up gradient, and now those wells are contaminated, we don't know how far wide it's coming this way, because the monitoring wells closest to Sturbridge do have exceedances. But no, I mean, you wouldn't know if the water in Sturbridge has exceedances or not in our private wells, because nobody tests it. And when I looked into, as a Board of Health, to see what it would cost, it's gonna cost us $500 a piece to get tested. That's something that you all would be able to do, have them test further out, which would be a peace of mind to the people also in Sturbridge, to have the private drinking water wells tested.
Right, and it gets back to the complicated nature of this, where the contamination in the monitoring wells is treated differently than the contamination in the private wells. And where the contamination in the monitoring wells exists, which is on the other side of the landfill, you know, the Sturbridge side, not the Charlton side, we don't go out and work our way back, right? I mean, we would take the information here and work our way out. And as part of what they are going to be required to do to address that contamination is to do exactly that. To start working their way out and determine the nature and extent of the contamination. That's the obligation, is to take the information that they have, determine the nature of it and the extent of it. So that, we're talking more of the long-term work, not the immediate response action for the drinking water, but that will be part of the investigation, it has to be part of the investigation.
Okay. have to finish this up in Sturbridge because I don't want to take up other people's
Sure.
time. But I think we need to test the water in Sturbridge. It may have been existing there for 10 years and nobody would know it because it's not something we would test for. And it's just now coming to Charlton because they do get tested.
Right, and that's a very good question. But before we continue, I just want to recognize Representative Paul Frost. If you want to say a couple words, if not, we can continue with questions.
I'll keep it brief so you guys can get to your questions. Representative Paul Frost, just want to say I'm here to help in any fashion that I can. I have been working, with the town, and Senator Goby, Representative Durant, who actually technically both represent the section of Charlton that is impacted, but being a state rep from Charlton, and even though this particular area is not directly in my district, I still, treat and want to work with Senator Goby, Representative Durant on anything that affects any resident of Charlton and beyond, and anywhere where I can be helpful, I will. And I know you've been under great shape with both your legislators and the town officials who care deeply about this and want to be as helpful as possible. And let you get back to your questions.
Thank you. Next question, sir.
John Jordan, 68 Edgewood Road. At what point in time or under what conditions would you consider Casella the responsible party?
Casella is a PRP. I mean, it's by operation of the statute. It's as I said, it's status liability. If you own it or you operate it or you owned it or operated it in the past, you are liable. It just is.
So what's the difference between PRP and an RP?
I don't know, Paul, if you want to field that. I mean, the practical answer is.
The practical answer is there is no difference. I believe, and I would defer to the legal counsels. My understanding is, for the technical difference, is that an RP is a person where we have actually gone to court and had a judgment that determined them to be the responsible party. So we talk about people being potentially responsible parties, but functionally, it's the same thing. The only time we would draw that difference if somebody dug in their heels and said, well, I absolutely don't believe I'm the responsible party, prove it, and if it went to court and the judge determined that, then that would be an RP.
So it's not something you can just...
It wouldn't be DEP to say. So we always talk in terms of potentially responsible parties, and for all of our purposes, our regulations, we require potentially responsible parties to conduct the same response actions and do the same work as responsible parties.
Okay, thank you. Ma'am?
John Medgar, 73 Beechwood Road. So we are one of the lucky ones as of right now that are not fully contaminated. We do have trace elements of chloroform or some such thing as been there. However, we're like the eye of the storm. The house next to us here, the house next to us here, the house across the street from us, as well as that Mr. Fox's land abuts us. And things have started to increase. In the very beginning, we've been, with everybody on it from the very beginning, but we did not opt into that water program. Because at the time we felt things were moving along, we had hoped that there would have been a different resolution to the situation. But now things are starting to up, the game is starting to up. And is there any way that we can get in on that now, or is it too late?
If you don't mind, I can
Sure.
take that. Charlton Board of Health, you can register with me today, or Mr. Philbrook. We'll get that email out to you tomorrow, and we'll get you water as soon as possible.
Okay, thank you.
What was the address again?
73.
Yeah?
Celeste Carlson, 77 Edgewood Road. They talk about the whole house filtration system, and in some of the earlier meetings, beginning of the summer, the consensus was that it's not effective for 1.4 dioxin, even though it's being used as a mitigation by Casella. And I didn't know if there was any further information that these filtration systems do work to keep those VOCs out that we're concerned with. Well, I'll try, and then you can correct me. The 1,4-dioxane is very difficult to treat. The houses that have the point of entry treatment systems have them because of the other chemicals, the TCE, what else do we have up here?
612 DCE.
So the chlorinated compounds, the treatment systems that have been installed in those homes are effective at treating for those chlorinated chemicals. We're seeing, I think, Kevin was telling me earlier, we're seeing some treatment of, or some decrease in the levels of dioxane with that, but the treatment is not designed for dioxane. I know we have a very complicated dioxane site that we're working on with Paul, and we have been investigating what treatment methods are. This is what EPA and DEP, and it's an emerging contaminant. We don't have a lot of experience with this. It's something that's not been regulated, and we're learning about this from EPA, from different parts of the country. So it's definitely one of these developing situations for us in determining what happens, what are the best things to do with dioxane. Talk about treatment
It's,
about.
like MJ said, it's not, sorry, Mary Jude said, it's not supposed to treat it. Sometimes it's really puzzling why it does treat it. You wouldn't necessarily, by default, put a point of entry carbon treatment system for a contaminant that's only 1,4-dioxane and expect with all confidence level that it would work, because it really, the science of it says it should not, but it does sometimes. So to say if you only have 1,4-dioxane in your well, the POET system really isn't a confident answer, because it may treat it or it may not, and we're not confident enough with that answer.
Next question? Sir?
I'm sorry.
You want to go first? Good.
I saw your hand first.
The POET systems. Mark Baldy's email to the residents said that detections approaching the safe drinking water standards would set off the need for a POET system. Can you give us a number for approaching? Do you have a number where you say below this number they get bottled water, above this number they get a POET?
The POET, non-POET has to do with whether they're the chlorinated compounds or the dioxin.
So it's a matter of what the mix is in the well rather than the concentration?
For whether there's a POET system, right, the POET systems are designed to treat the chlorinated compounds. So that, I mean, that,
I got it.
does that,
Even some of the lower concentrations. Okay.
Thank you.
Sir?
Was the DEP notified in 2012 of the 1,4-dioxane exceedance at 70 H-foot?
2012, not to my knowledge, not in 2012.
which address, I'm sorry?
70 H-foot, it's had exceedance ever since. But it started in 2012.
What, yeah, we don't have the 2012 date. Do you have information that
I
you
can
can
get,
send to us?
the owners have moved. It's on some of the spreadsheets that came from Taiwan.
Okay. We'll check
I
that
can,
out.
I can get it to you if you need it.
Thank you. Any other questions? Ma'am?
This is a little off track.
If you could just state your name and address for the record, please.
My name is Sarah Gervais, I live at 161 Berry Corn Road, I am in a butter. Does DEP have a strategic or long-range plan for waste management in this state? And if so, where does this landfill fall into that? Because the issue that we're discussing here tonight, the water is certainly first and foremost on our minds. However, those of us who have lived in that area, we built our house there in '83, it was just a sleepy little town dump, much like Charlton's dump. And unfortunately, we've seen changes over the years, but our ultimate goal is to shut it down because there are other issues which you are well aware of, the smell, noise, quality of life, property values. So I'm just curious, do you have a long-range plan for waste management in the state? And if so, where, does that include Casella? And if so, how would that impact your decision-making process as you go forward with the permitting process?
It's kind of a lot of questions rolled into one.
Right.
Yes, there's a solid waste master plan, it's available on our website. I don't know what it says in terms of counting. Southbridge landfill is right now the largest operating landfill in the state.
Right.
So I don't know if it speaks in specific terms about the current incinerators, the current landfills. You know, I just don't know, but it is available on our website. As we sit here now, that's not something that we're considering in terms of tracking this cleanup, or looking at the permit applications. I mean, we don't go out and invite people to expand their landfills. They come to us and they make a business decision. I think it was Robin, somebody mentioned that the initial plan that went through the MEPA review process for the expansion has been dramatically scaled back. So they're changing their business strategy as they're going along about how big the expansion's going to be. So relative to the ongoing situation, I'm not sure that we're really thinking very much about solid waste master plan. But that information is available, and I think Kirsty would probably be happy to talk to you about solid waste master plan.
I love the solid waste master plan, I'd be happy to talk about it. John Fisher's most recent numbers had the 2017 because the Southbridge landfill closing. But as you said, the DEP doesn't control whether they ask for expansions. So it's not considered necessary to meet the solid waste master plan's goals, if that's your ultimate question.
Thank you. Sir,
So from the expansions.
if you want to state your name
Oh,
first,
sorry.
please.
Todd Cummings, 21 Eleanor Lane. So from the expansion standpoint, and I'm asking us from the DEP standpoint, do you have the ability to put the expansion request on hold until all residents are made whole with water?
The expansion request is on hold right now because we don't have the information to go forward. The permitting, to take for example, the request for the site assignment, which is a separate permit. There is in the regulation a list of 16 criteria that you have to meet in order to be able to go forward with your site assignment. There isn't something in there that says, are there contaminated private wells that people still want there to be a water line installed for? There's nothing that says that. There is a section that says, if there is a current impact from the facility, is this project going to improve conditions? And we don't have an answer to that question from the information that they've given us. Part of the answer to that question is, how is this project going to make the condition of the private wells better? I feel like that's a complicated answer, but you know, it's not something where we can say there's contamination in private wells, we can't check the box. There's no checkbox for that. There is something that we can look at the current impacts and what the additional impacts would be and decide whether that makes sense. We don't have information about the groundwater that even lets us consider that at this point, and therefore the application's on hold.
Because what enforces my question is, I watched on YouTube the August Board of Health meeting in Southbridge, and they're ready to go. They've hired a hearing officer. They're ready for, I think, October, November to start having hearings. So, you know, hearing that, and as the gentleman mentioned, Southbridge is just ready to go and say everything is fine. And as we're all experiencing, it's not. So I'm getting two stories from what I hear. And I like, the story here, and I agree and understand, but then when you listen to Southbridge's side of it, they seem to be ready that this is just gonna continue to roll. So I just curious as to where DEP stands and where we stand.
Yeah. Right now, the permit applications are awaiting the same kind of groundwater information that's informing the 21E program. It's all the same questions.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Kirsty Pesci, Massper, just to make sure that we're clear on that, Mary Jude, we're talking about the determination of site suitability application and also the permit to expand with cells on top of cells, the 1.11. So it's not just the footprint expansion, it's also correct the cells on top of cells, because I think it's really confusing to people between the
I
Charlton.
think it's 1.11.
Yeah, phase
Right,
1.11,
It's
right.
it's a different permit with different
And it
considerations.
doesn't need a site assignment, that one, so, yeah, okay.
Robin?
So I'm sitting here quietly and wringing my hands a little bit, but I do feel like I need to say something. And I'd like to take the opportunity to say that with DEP in the room and our representatives. When Southbridge was having their hearings 10 years ago for their expansion at that time, we were really clear from the Board of Selectmen, the Board of Health, in all of our communications, that a water line needed to be considered, and that this landfill was in the middle of residential area, and had contaminants, and were expanding those contaminants. I need to say that I am disheartened that we're here 10 years later, and I have made the same claim to and complaint to Casella directly, that they need to be designing a water line and they need to be installing a water line for just this type of issue. It's disheartening that there is waterborne dioxide in this many wells in the town of Charlton, and now it feels that this is sucked, the argument over whether or not it is the landfill has sucked out all of the energy and discussion on who has done it versus the clear and responsible thing for Casella to be doing, and should have been doing 10 years ago, would have been to be planning that water line, putting money away over the last 10 years, and having it done by now before we ever got to this point. And I'm disappointed. I don't know how to get them to move, but I can tell you that that is exactly what I've said to them over and over, and I just need to say it again with the representatives and DEP in the room. I don't think the argument should be whether or not they have caused this contamination. I think the discussion should be when we put the water line in, because you are there, you will be completing that expansion that they were granted 10 years ago, and they are looking for some end result at some point. How long do we need to wait until they protect the residents down there?
Thank you, Robin.
Joe, I'd just like
John?
to say something, just echoing Robin's comments. First, thank you very much to DEP and to the delegation for showing up. We had extensive experience with Mark Baldy out of the Worcester office with the ExxonMobil problem that we had. And through his leadership and the help that we received from the delegation, they literally twisted ExxonMobil's arm by saying, if you don't do this, we are going to find you the RP, the responsible party, in court, and then you're gonna have a problem. And that's how the water line was done for the ExxonMobil thing. As Robin said, it's very disheartening that Casella is actually sitting there saying, when they've had two landfills there, one the old Southbridge landfill, which will, which I'm sure their game plan is now, they're gonna play Mexican standoff by pointing the finger at Southbridge, saying it's your old landfill that's doing this. That's their end game. The thing is, they just wanna keep kicking this down the road so that when the landfill actually closes because they can't expand it anymore, they wanna say, we'll see you later. I think that they were playing Russian roulette, hoping that this wouldn't happen and not having to put a water line in. Well, now it's happened, and now they're trying to blame everybody else. They're trying to blame the people down on 169. They're trying to blame, a neighbor up on H-Foot Road. They have the ability to get on these properties. They've, I won't say slandered, but they've tossed a name out there, Millennium, to sort of draw attention to them. That's not the type of neighbor that we want doing business near us, okay? They're not in our town operating, and they've caused very, very bad things to happen in our town to our residents. I can't say strongly enough, they need to get some morals, and they need to put a water line in town. That's the end of it. Never mind doing a study on it, never mind pointing fingers at anybody else. Common sense says that this came from them and it's in our water. We want to correct it. So, you know, Robin was being very, very polite because she has to deal with them all the time. I don't have to deal with them all the time, and that's the way I feel about it. It's baloney that they're doing this. It's absolute baloney. And, you know, what are my words gonna force them to do, to put a water line in? I doubt it, but our concerted efforts through DEP and through the state delegation is what's gonna make this happen. And I hope that they realize that we're not going away. It's the same thing as ExxonMobil, and we're gonna keep the pressure on.
Thank you, John. Yeah. Any other questions? Sir?
Bob Audette from the Board of Health in Sturbridge. The immediate mitigation is to have bottled water. Is that correct?
Yes.
And that ends in December?
No, there's required bottled water for anybody that has an actual detection. That bottled water is mandated by us, that must continue, and they cannot stop that until we tell them it's okay to stop that, and when we're good and satisfied, they can stop that. The courtesy water, which is folks that don't have any detections at this point yet, those will continue, as MJ said, for the next quarter, through the Board of Health agreement with Casella.
The next step from bottled water, obviously, these people can't have bottled water the rest of their lives. So the next step would be a water line, is that correct?
It depends on if there's any other feasible alternatives.
Okay.
It's
Well,
not-
let's say the next step is a water line, so it gives them clean water that's not contaminated. I can't see how that corrects the immediate problem. But the future problem with the contaminants that are in the soil, they're still there, they're just gonna continue. The water line is